You know, I've been the biggest fan of Iceberg Explained videos since whenever I saw them the first time. So I thought it was a good idea if I did an Iceberg video myself, because I mean they get views, they get traction, whatever, all that good stuff. And I think the concept of them is pretty good, right? I thought for the first Iceberg video, why not make it on something interesting, something captivating, something, let's just say, unusual. So I thought it was a good idea to do an Iceberg video on Al-Qaeda. So I stole this Iceberg chart from Twitter. I'll probably have it on the screen or whatever. I'm not even going to give him a proper shout out because I went through his profile. I'm not even going to bother too much. But shout out for creating that. I mean, it's an interesting thing. I had to go through it and look into it. And I mean, it's fucking Al-Qaeda, guys. Like, if you haven't heard about Al-Qaeda, by the year of 2025, I think you're either newborn or you're senile. You know, let's get started. Get some fucking popcorn or whatever the fuck. Actually, don't even do that. You know what I do? I have this as background noise. So if you guys want to do that, you know, go for it. I'm fully in support of that. I do that shit all the time. So let's get started. The Fadl Testimony. So Jamal al-Fadl's testimony is, it's mostly when they find out about the whole structure of Al-Qaeda through one of the Bin Laden's closest associates from Sudan. He name drops Bin Laden as the leader of this organization. He mentions all of these other 25 top members. He discusses their intentions, including getting uranium and so on, making weapons of mass destruction. He exposes generally how the organization functions. He talks about how they have fatwas, like religious rulings, permitting the killings of other Muslims, things like that. It's not really that deep. He was known for being a womanizer, apparently. That's an FBI note, I guess. So, you know, take it that as you will. East African Embassy. This is in reference to the 1998 US embassy bombings in Kenya and Tanzania, which claims the lives of around 400 people with 4,000 wounded. Bin Laden had multiple claims, or these journalists claim many different things, but per Bin Laden himself, this was in response to the US invasion of Somalia. So what do you do when that happens? Well, obviously you go towards mostly civilian targets who aren't even Americans. You kill majority African locals, which, you know, totally makes sense. And he conveniently also picked this on the date where when the US troops arrived in Saudi Arabia. And this was justified by them by essentially claiming that they warned that this would happen if you were the friends of the US, so they're not responsible for any of the victims. Which again, I don't think makes any sense, because what do Kenyan civilians have to do with the United States? I don't know. It's all in the air, right? Yeah, essentially these attacks were made by having a lot of bombs in cars and just ramming into the embassy buildings, using a lot of high explosive material. The group took responsibility, was normally used by the Egyptian Islamic Jihad, which we will talk about later, so don't worry about that. USS Cole. So this is about the Al-Qaeda attack on the US Navy in Aden, in Yemen. This event caused the US to shift their entire anti-terrorism or naval doctrine, because this just came at them. Suicide attack, right? So it didn't anticipate it, didn't shoot at it. Then probably should have done it, right? They should have probably done it. 17 US Navy sailors were killed, 7 were injured. It's considered the deadliest attack on a United States naval vessel since 1987. Al-Qaeda claimed responsibility for the attack. The US considered the Sudan liable for the attack, and Sudan decided to just pay back the money, you know, in like 2021. That's when the agreement actually came in. Of course, this was hailed as a great victory for Bin Laden when he was in Afghanistan. They got more recruits. A lot of Gulf states were sending money. But to be fair as well, at the end of the day, most people who were involved in this, they died. Straight up. One of the guys who was involved, killed by these missiles that the US has, who shred you up. So, I mean, I don't know if you'd want to have that. Another guy was just sent to Guantanamo Bay. So if you want to get waterboarded or whatever, you're like, yeah, I know you'd want to do that. The Bin Laden-King Fahd split. So some people might not know this, but Bin Laden comes from a very wealthy family from Saudi Arabia. So it's kind of natural that he's gonna have these ties in Saudi. So following the Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan, bin Laden went back to Saudi Arabia for a period, and he was known for being this freedom fighter or whatever, because he was boasted in their media and Western media generally speaking. After his return, he came back to the Saudi frame of everything, right? He offered to send al-Qaeda to overthrow the Yemeni Socialist Party in South Yemen. He tried to disrupt the Yemeni unification process by assassinating Yemeni socialist leaders. Saudis told him to just, chill out because they talked with the Yemenis and whatever. And he just continued. But yeah, at the end of the day, he still continued to work with Saudi intelligence. He worked with the Pakistani intelligence. He tried sending 800. He led 800 Arab foreign fighters during the Battle of Jalalabad, which was one of these battles in Afghanistan after the Soviet withdrawal. So the Afghan socialist government was still fighting. The thing was, they were unsuccessful. So that was just a blunder on his end. Later on, by 1990, bin Laden offers the Saudi family of supporting them against Iraq. Because Iraq invades Kuwait, there's a big fear in Saudi that they'll be next. And bin Laden offers them to just take al-Qaeda instead of the US support. And he didn't care. He just said like, we'll fight him with our religion. We are religious, right? We're gonna go through with this. So obviously I just told him like, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. We're just gonna have the US forces in Saudi instead. And bin Laden just has a Berg out. He doesn't enjoy any of this. And he says that, the American unbelievers are ruining everything. And that the Saudi monarchy is being complacent with this non-believer, infidel state. He tries to get all this support within Saudi. None of them really go with him on this. And him just criticizing the Saudi monarchy just doesn't work because, it's Saudi fucking Arabia. So that doesn't really work. So he's under house arrest until, he's forced to leave to Sudan. And we'll get more into the Sudan arc later because it plays a major role in all of this. The Afghan Soviet War, everyone should know this by now, but the thing that made bin Laden famous initially, gave him the clout or whatever, was his role in the Afghan Soviet War. Because he was, as mentioned before, he was a wealthy Arab from Saudi, and he used his money to aid these rebels in Afghanistan. So he went there. Of course, he had the money. There was also the money that came through Operation Cyclone, which is, the CIA's and Pakistan, all these other factions who aided within Afghanistan, these other groups. And bin Laden was involved in that. Bin Laden was involved with these other people who established Maktab al-Khidmat, which I will mention this later on as well. This was the way they funneled money, arms, and fighters into Afghanistan. All of this money came from abroad, not just Arab countries, but even the US and Europe and so on. Pay all these fighters and so on. Bin Laden became pretty popular since he led a lot of these Arab volunteers. And generally speaking, that's where a lot of his clout came from, because he was known for, he was presented in Arab media a lot, even Western media to some extent, but they used this point to make him into this sort of hero figure, to idealize him or whatever, which obviously, if you know history, this came to backfire very hard later on. AQ in Sudan. Okay, now we're reaching to the part about bin Laden's arc in Sudan. So some people might not know this, but Sudan was led by Islamists during Bashir and these other characters in that country during the National Islamic Front. They invited bin Laden to relocate to their country, and essentially Sudan wanted to be this headquarters for just expanding this Islamic cause. And bin Laden already had this money and all that on him, so he was investing a lot of this into Sudan's construction and all that. And al-Qaeda at the time thought bin Laden was pretty smart with this, and they wanted to just move themselves to Sudan. And this happened for a while, so for a while they were based in Sudan. And during this time as well, bin Laden is actually investing. So I don't mean just a terrorist organization, I mean they're actually building, securing contracts to build airports, they're doing all these projects, they're building roads or whatever, because they have the money. Yeah, and bin Laden's family, they relocated from Afghanistan to Sudan. He was gonna build these roads and everything. They brought all this construction equipment, and all these al-Qaeda businesses started being established in Sudan. And of course, when the Sudanese government couldn't really pay for any of this, they were compensated. They just gave the company land instead, and this just made Al-Qaeda pretty powerful in Sudan. So they basically had the monopoly on their entire agriculture sphere, generally speaking. They had a lot of the land, they had a lot of the farming. So they would just tell Al-Qaeda people to do this, while on the down low, you'd have these training programs and teach these veterans how to do shit. Just keeping them in touch with war and so on. Of course, this didn't last forever because in 1996, Bin Laden was asked to leave Sudan because the US was pressuring them. Very much so, because there was an attempted assassination on Hosni Mubarak, the president of Egypt at the time, and they saw him as connected to it. There was a huge chance that Bin Laden and Al-Qaeda were connected to it because of aforementioned organization, the Egyptian Islamic Jihad, which we'll talk about later, and about its connection to Al-Qaeda. And Bin Laden left Sudan to, of course, Afghanistan. And this is, it's something. CIA funding. Okay, now we're getting kind of spicy. Okay, this is shit people don't want to talk about because it's inconvenient or whatever. Some might even deny it. They might say that, oh look, CIA couldn't have done it because Pakistan did it. Guys, let's be fucking for real now, right? You think Pakistan in the 80s had zero contact with the US? They didn't know where the money went. That's not even, Bin Laden himself admits that Arab volunteers that were recruited at his Pakistani-based camp underwent training by Pakistani and American officers with the weapons provided by the US and funds provided by Saudi. So I don't know what more you need beyond that. Also, the other thing is, Bin Laden's key Afghan allies during the war, like Haqqani and Hekmatyar, were some of the CIA's greatest beneficiaries. What the fuck you call it? CIA's pay pigs, bro. What the fuck do you want to call that? With Haqqani being backed directly by the CIA without any Pakistani intelligence role at all. Generally speaking, aid the growth of Bin Laden. And the CIA generally backed the Pakistani attempt to recruit and train foreign Mujahideen or whatever from around the globe, and using these Islamic organizations to just have these broad foreign members just coming into Afghanistan. On top of this, the British Foreign Secretary between 1997 to 2001, Robin Cook, I don't know who the fuck let him cook his name, would state that Bin Laden was though a product of a monumental miscalculation by Western security agencies. Throughout the 80s, he was owned by the CIA and funded by the Saudis to wage jihad against the Russian occupation of Afghanistan. Al-Qaeda, literally the database, was originally the computer file of the thousands of Mujahideen who were recruited and trained with the help of the CIA to defeat the Russians. So generally speaking, I don't think this is a controversial lie or a claim to say that there was some form of CIA funding that he received. According to another journalist, Ahmed Rashid, in 1986, Bin Laden helped build the Khosh tunnel complex, which the CIA was funding as a major arms storage depot and training facility and medical center for the Mujahideen. Although Bin Laden would elsewhere claim that the Americans had no mentionable role and they are lying when they say that they cooperated with us during the Soviet-Afghan War, in a 1995 interview, Bin Laden himself said, "To counter these atheist Russians, the Saudis chose me as their representative in Afghanistan. I settled in Pakistan in the Afghan border region. There I received volunteers who came from the Saudi kingdom and from all over the Arab and Muslim countries. I set up my first camp where these volunteers were trained by Pakistani and American officers. The weapons were supplied by the Americans, the money by the Saudis." So I mean, yeah, again, it's kind of fucking obvious, guys. Let's not even get ahead of ourselves. Jamaah Nasr al-Islam wa Muslimin. Okay, so this is another AQ affiliated group. This time in West Africa. This is a rather new group. This is from 2017, I think. They declared allegiance to the Al-Qaeda leadership and also to the Taliban, funnily enough. So technically an actual ruling entity by now. And they also praised Bin Laden and Zarqawi, these other Al-Qaeda leaders. And we have one of the Al-Qaeda leaders, he recent audio message approving the union between these groups. And Al-Qaeda issued a statement approving the new group and accepting their oath of allegiance. And yeah, this is generally speaking an Al-Qaeda group in West Africa trying to establish an authority with Islamic law. And it's a generally recent group. In 2022, the Africa Center for Strategic Study said that this said group does not have wide popular support at all. It lacks it. Tora Bora. Okay, now this is pretty fucking funny. So real ones remember when Bin Laden used to have this as his HQ. Basically in the early 2000s, maybe in the 90s, there was this Afghan mountain area where Bin Laden and all his supporters were at. And in 2002, I believe, sometime in the early 2000s, the US pushed towards this area in the war against terror in response to 9/11. Now you'd think the US would probably get this done, whatever, since Bin Laden was actually present in this area. Somehow, this does not occur. They fail to capture him. They kill a lot of these major Al-Qaeda people, don't get that wrong. But a lot of these Afghans that they were working with, these militias and so on, that were supposed to be this new army, they were beefing with each other or taking care of their fast more than the actual battle, so they would withdraw and leave the Americans to fight alone to break their fast or whatever. And at some point there's a ceasefire made, which, I mean, I don't know why the fuck they would agree to a ceasefire. Yeah, generally speaking, the progress was very slow because of the Afghans retreating every night to break their fast, while a few US special forces alone would have to fight. And a lot of people bring this up, like, why didn't they just send more soldiers or whatever? And no one really has an answer to that. They really didn't send everything to this area where they knew Bin Laden was at, and Bin Laden escaped. He just escaped from this battle. And there are a lot of theories and stuff that he probably just crossed into Pakistan, or even that Pakistan sent helicopters to evacuate him while they were doing these brief ceasefires where Al-Qaeda would supposedly surrender, but Bin Laden and these people would just run away. So this is basically a big American blunder. That's what this is. They essentially just let him leave and escape. Nick Berg. Okay, now this is a more bitter and fucked up one. Nicholas Berg, American freelance radio tower repairman. He really went to just Iraq for work or whatever after the occupation. He was just straight up kidnapped, and they claim this was a response to Abu Ghraib torture and prisoner abuse that happened during the US occupation. Initially, they had found his body decapitated on the Baghdad overpass. They informed his family, they didn't say he was decapitated. Later on, there's a video on the internet that gets released, and it's called Abu Musab al-Zarqawi Slaughters an American, which shows a video of him introducing himself. He's wearing an orange jumpsuit. He mentions his name, he mentions his father's name, his mother's name, his siblings, where he's from, and he's straight up beheaded by Zarqawi, who later on becomes the Al-Qaeda leader. Might have even been the Al-Qaeda leader at the time, I'm not too sure. And yeah, this used to be pretty big on internet. This was like a big gore video, basically. People would share this around and shit. It's pretty vile. I don't know why you'd kill some US civilian yet again, like at war. I don't know. That's just me. Civilians, I don't know. Civilians, I don't think are a fair target. But who am I to judge, right? Charlie Hebdo 2015. Okay, guys. Real ones remember when this shit was everywhere, dude. 2010s were fucking crazy because of this shit. So Charlie Hebdo is a French magazine, which I think, yeah, it goes pretty far. Now, would I say it goes far enough for people to be justified in doing just random terrorism? Yeah, I don't know about that. So basically, because of this Charlie Hebdo skit on Muslims or whatever, I remember this. This went crazy at the time. They killed 12 people, injured 11 others. They claimed they were Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula specifically. They fled after the shooting, triggered a manhunt, were killed by French police. Then other attacks occurred afterwards. One of them was the Kosher supermarket siege, which a French-born Malian Muslim took hostages and murdered 4 people, all Jews, before being killed by French commandos. And in response to this, France did this massive manhunt, tried to find all these suspects, we exchanged fire with the police. There was a huge hostage crisis in that area in France, and it really didn't really work out to them because they were shot dead after they emerged from the building. I mean, it is what it is. The Caucasus Emirate. Okay, now reaching the Soviet sphere, you could say. The Caucasus Emirate was a terrorist organization as well in Chechnya, generally North Caucasus, which they would claim that they will kick out the Russians, whatever. create an Islamic Emirate in this area, and so on. And these guys were the successors of the old Chechen independent republic that had occurred in the 90s. And they straight up just disavowed that shit. They said, you know what, fuck having a republic, we want an emirate, and we want to be whatever. Essentially just Al-Qaeda in Chechnya, that's essentially what it was. And it's further evident with during the Syrian war when they voiced support for al-Nusra and aligned themselves with it. And al-Nusra is an Al-Qaeda affiliated organization in Syria, that should be noted. Maktab al-Khidmat. So we briefly mentioned this before, that this was the thing that was used for funding a lot of the Afghanistan stuff, to bring volunteers in and so on. And this was founded by a bunch of people, initially speaking. And it's basically, you know, as I said, funding and recruitment network. And this group was very close with Pakistan and even the US, Saudi. They needed these sorts of ways to get people in and get the money in. And this worked with all these Islamist groups within Afghanistan as well. And they had these recruitment and fundraising officers in many Western countries. The US was one of the main fundraising destinations. Some of their leaders would go to the mosques in the US, and they just opened these bureaus to get the money in. Most of these finances support networks had these fronts as these NGOs, and of course after 9/11 a lot of these were shut down, because yeah, obviously at some point this becomes Al-Qaeda, right? And it became obvious by 1998. One of these other leaders they had died. And this other leader they had, he was more of extreme guy in the sense that he wanted to export this as well, and he really wanted this to be this Islamic government that would have well, that's actually the chill guy wanted that, so you know, whatever. What these other guys wanted, and this is who bin Laden was very influenced by, he wanted to have a global jihad, and it would overthrow all these governments they deemed un-Islamic or whatever. And he, conveniently enough, he is an Egyptian Islamic Jihad leader. So again, this connection with Egyptian Islamic Jihad and Al-Qaeda becomes very clear at this point. This other more chill guy, whatever, the guy who wants Islamism in one country, he gets blown up. No one really knows who did it. But after this, bin Laden takes full control of this. And yeah, recruitment group they have that gets all these funds or whatever gets absorbed into Al-Qaeda. Al-Nusra. Okay, now reaching the Syrian territory. In 2013, Al-Nusra Front, or Jabhat al-Nusra, was publicly confirmed as the Syrian affiliate of Al-Qaeda. After Zawahiri, who, as mentioned before with the Maktab thing, he rejected the merger attempted by Baghdadi, who creates the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, more commonly known as ISIS. Upon the war in Syria, Baghdadi, the leader of ISIS and Al-Qaeda's Central Command, authorized one of their members, Abu Muhammad al-Julani, or Ahmed al-Shara, the new Syrian president, which is pretty funny to look at, to set up a Syrian offshoot of Al-Qaeda to bring down the Assad government to establish an Islamic State in Syria. Julani and 6 colleagues of his crossed from Iraq into Syria, reached out to these Islamists who have been released from prisons in Syria, known Sinai military prison. After meeting these prisoners, they formalized plans, their objectives of their groups or whatever, and they announced themselves as the Nusra Front. Many of these Nusra members were, generally speaking, veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan who had fought for Al-Qaeda there. The HTS-AQ split. Okay, now this gets pretty funny because this goes back to, similarly how we mentioned before, how some in the early Islamist circles, some of them wanted to have this in just in one country, some wanted a global jihad. Essentially what happened here is the Nusra Front, and Julani, as we mentioned before, he tries to make new independent entity from Nusra. He reforms this a bunch of times, Jabhat Fatah al-Sham and then Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, aka HTS. Of course, these other Nusra commanders, some of them are more, they're not willing to accept this. They could say it's adopting nationalist doctrines. And these Al-Qaeda loyalists, they just make their own group. They create Huras al-Din. HTS removed a lot of the global caliphate rhetoric. They made this more local, with wanting an Islamic state in Syria itself, not really spreading this across the world or whatever. And they really try to just make themselves seem as an independent organization. And Al-Qaeda's leadership also started viewing them as these like breakaway people who shattered their oath of allegiance. So a lot of them just left HTS. They made their own group, whatever. They really were against this. They didn't like that. It wasn't sanctioned by the Al-Qaeda leadership. The Saddam-AQ conspiracy. Okay, now this is a pretty funny one. A lot of this was from early 2000s during the invasion of Iraq and prior to it a bit, where a lot of these claims came in from the US especially. They would make this almost like narrative that Saddam Hussein and al-Qaeda had some form of connection. And even Russia alleged this. Russia's informed the US that Iraq had hands in 9/11 and so on. So, I mean, it's a pretty absurd take given that if you look at earlier, bin Laden was willing to help Saudi against Iraq, against invasion by Iraq. I mean, this got pretty bad. There were claims that Mohammed Atta met up with the Iraqi intelligence officers, and this was dismissed by like the CIA director. There was no evidence of such a meeting. Bush even distanced himself in 2006, saying that he thought he never said it. He said, "I don't think we ever said that. At least I didn't say that there was a direct connection between September 11th and Saddam Hussein." And even Al-Qaeda members would joke about this. They'd say that, bin Laden hated Saddam and he considered him a scotch-drinking woman-chasing apostate. So, I mean, I think it's kind of a ridiculous assertion. AQ-ISIS split. Okay, most people might not be too aware of this, but ISIS came from Al-Qaeda. I don't know who needs to really have this hammered in, but yeah, that's a thing. Al-Qaeda's council in Iraq in 2006 declared establishment of the Islamic State of Iraq, and that this would be chunks of Iraq, essentially most of it, and Baghdadi being announced as the emir of that state. And this comes into tensions with Al-Qaeda later on, when in 2013 Baghdadi releases this audio message where he announces that the Jabhat al-Nusra, the Nusra Front, as mentioned before, the al-Qaeda affiliate in Syria, were merging with his Islamic State of Iraq group into the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria under his command. And he claimed that Jolani, again the current president of Syria, had been dispatched by the Islamic State of Iraq to Syria to meet the pre-existing cells in the country, and that the Islamic State had provided Nusra with the plans and strategy needed for the Syrian war and the funding for their activities. And the next day, Jolani rejected the proposed merger and said he is loyal to Al-Qaeda and its leader Zawahiri. And Jolani just told him that none of them were aware of this merger or whatever. Nusra then split. Some joined the ISIS, some joined with the Jolani or joined other Islamist groups. And Zawahiri ordered disbandment of ISIS, said that Nusra should be considered the only Al-Qaeda branch in Syria, and officially integrated Nusra into the Al-Qaeda's global network, al-Shabaab. Okay, now this is also a pretty funny one. Al-Shabaab, you maybe have heard of it, I'm not too sure. They're essentially the Al-Qaeda group in Somalia and generally speaking East Africa. They were pretty big and still are pretty big in Somalia, and there's their war over there. They justify their attacks on civilians and government forces. Some people would say that they were not really Al-Qaeda initially, that they just got into it over time, since these were connected more to these local Islamic courts or whatever for the longest time. And they would just harbor these Al-Qaeda leaders. But Al-Shabaab did declare itself allegiant to Al-Qaeda. They said they had a video saying at your service, Osama, where they showed their allegiance to bin Laden and everything. And Zawahiri accepted them as their affiliate. And of course, Al-Shabaab pledged their allegiance to him as well, and he confirmed their alliance. Letter to the American people. Okay, now this one is a big one. Bin Laden had let's just say a piece where he supposedly critiques the United States. And one of his things is, he has multiple points, to be fair. One of them is that he doesn't like the fact the US is this rejection of Islamic Sharia law or whatever. And he thinks that the US secular legal system is like evil, while the divine law of Islam is the opposite of this product of human desires and everything. And he condemns how the economy works in the US, and he talks about interest on loans, which you can't say it's reasonable. And he says that usury is a violation of not only Islamic principle but moral standards across religions, which I would say is kind of true. Bin Laden then talks about this is how it goes from like 0 to 100 pretty fast. So he goes from interest and loans are bad, and that his economic policies, they cause these, injustices and all that. And then he says the Jews are controlling the United States policies, media, and economy. So, I mean, yeah, he goes from 0 to 100 pretty fast. He just goes for the JQ. And then he goes further. He says, actually, American civilians, a fair target, because, they're taxpayers. Therefore, they're supporting every Arab being killed. Which, I think that's kind of a psychotic fucking analysis. But then he just says, well, Americans just become Muslim, and that'll fix everything. Which, I don't know how the fuck that works. So what? So if he's like Muslim, but he still pays tax, is he like still killing Arab children? Like, I don't get it. Anyways, Bin Laden also demands the US withdraw its military forces from Muslim lands and end its support for corrupt leaders in these regions, and cease interfering with Islamic education. And he says this will just escalate shit if those demands are not met. Which, again, it's like, okay, so if it's not in Muslim lands, it's fine, apparently. That's what I'm getting from this. And then, Bin Laden freaks out the US for what he perceives as widespread moral decay, that they accept practices like sex, homosexuality, gambling, and that these are a stark contrast to Islamic values. And he talks about them having double standards and American hypocrisy with Israel and Palestine, and the US supporting these supposed oppressive regimes in Muslim countries and preventing them from creating this Islamic Sharia law stuff or whatever. Which, again, look, you're gonna find sexuality and homosexuality and gambling anywhere in the fucking Arab world. I don't know what he's on about. You'll find that even in like Islamist societies. I'll be frank. Not even just like Egypt or fuck. And he holds the US accountable for economic exploitation, especially the oil resources and military involvement in those countries. Which, I mean, sure, but I don't know, this overlaps the other stuff. So, whatever. That's Bin Laden's little message to Americans. Egyptian Islamic Jihad. Okay, now this is something, to say the least. Egyptian Islamic Jihad is a rather old group. It's late 70s. They're responsible for killing the Egyptian president Anwar Sadat. And over time, they aligned with Al-Qaeda. Sort of just evolved like that, because they also went to Afghanistan and so on. And they had similar goals, generally speaking. It was just, originally it was to just overthrow the Egyptian government, have an Islamic law, and then it became this global jihad ideology over time. Zawahiri was actually from this organization, and he was, practically speaking, one of the main leaders and one of the most influential people of the whole movement. So his faction forming an alliance with Al-Qaeda just led them to just merge over time. Generally speaking, Al-Qaeda as an organization is, generally speaking, Bin Laden's money, Bin Laden's finance, and Zawahiri's ideological and operational leadership. You cannot divorce these things. Al-Qaeda is, generally speaking, a successor to the Egyptian Islamic Jihad. The AQ-Taliban alliance. The AQ-Taliban alliance refers generally to the fact that Bin Laden settled in Afghanistan after he left Sudan, where he forged a very personal relationship with the Taliban leaders at the time, and he pledged an allegiance, and he considered Afghanistan under the Taliban to be the only Islamic country on earth. And of course, this is the main reason the US even invades Afghanistan in the first place, because the Taliban refused to hand them over after 9/11. And we're saying that they would maybe consider handing him to an Islamic court if he was found guilty of 9/11 and he presented some evidence for it or anything. And they offered days after the actual invasion and war to give him to any neutral country and they would check into it. Despite all of this, there is still a fundamental tie between Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, with Al-Qaeda fighters still pledging allegiance to the Taliban. And not just Al-Qaeda itself, also their affiliate groups, all of them, they all pledge an allegiance towards the Taliban, and they celebrated the Taliban takeover. All the groups did, even HTS and these other groups, they all did as well, because they see this as an origin for them. And Bin Laden did pledge himself to the Taliban, similar to how other groups pledged to Bin Laden. He pledged to the Taliban at the time, to Mullah Omar, the leader of the Taliban. Oh, and the most infamous for last, 9/11. 9/11. I didn't even write anything for this part. I didn't even take any notes for this. I know this by heart. All I will say right now, you cannot tell me that 2 planes, 3 towers. I'm just gonna say that right now. I don't think that should even be fucking possible by any stretch of the imagination. But let's say we go with it. The story is a bunch of Al-Qaeda members hijacked planes. The infamous Mohammed Atta, he is involved in that, and they crashed their planes into the Twin Towers, the World Trade Center, 11th September 2001. A lot of innocent people die. It's like this horrible tragedy in the US. Bush starts the war on terror over this. It's a big incident. But I'm sorry, bro, Building 7 shouldn't have fucking collapsed. I'm just gonna say that right now. That, in no way does that make any sense. Like, you could have fooled me if it was just, okay, the Twin Towers collapsed. Whatever, I'd buy into that. I wouldn't even buy the steel beam story, right? I'd just be like, whatever, it doesn't matter. But Building 7 collapsing is just absurd. It's too convenient. And generally speaking, 9/11 is another thing we won't really talk about. Everyone fucking warned about it. Every intelligence agency informed the US, like, okay, yeah, there's some shit gonna happen. Please be careful. And there was no security or anything. That whole shit was just allowed. Generally speaking, it's a bit absurd. Very convenient for the US, and conveniently enough, Bin Laden also believed in these things. He believed that the US should invade Muslim lands or whatever because it would be their graveyard, right, with Afghanistan, which obviously kind of didn't happen because America just invaded like 5-10 countries, destabilized all of them. Yeah, the 9/11, beyond the memes and merchandise and everything that came from that, pretty horrible event. I still think it was an inside job. Anyways, guys, yeah, there's a plane heading your way.
Allahu Akbar.
Alright, second part, let's not even bother with this, let's just get right into this. Qatari funding. So it's not a secret that Al-Qaeda will need funding from abroad, and one of the most alleged places, and probably most documented one, is Qatar. A lot of these Qatari business people, a lot of them are also financiers of Al-Qaeda. I think some of the top senior level financiers of Al-Qaeda, 2 of them were Qataris. One of them was a former employee at the Qatar Central Bank. And these people are actually on terrorist blacklists, and they just casually stroll around in Qatar as if nothing is happening. Another thing is that one of Bin Laden's main sources of funding was the Qatar charity. They openly said this a lot of the time, privately speaking. Furthermore, in the modern context, in the Syrian war, Qatar charity was very involved with funding the al-Nusra front, the Al-Qaeda affiliate in Syria. Qatar charity also sent money to Al-Qaeda members stationed in Chechnya. They were fighting there at the time. And these are not like a small amount of money. This is a lot of money coming in. Donations and so on, very openly through social media, through many methods. It's actually very insane to look at it that way. They would also pay up ransoms. For example, when Al-Qaeda will capture civilians, they'll demand money for it. Qatar would come in and pay them to release them, right? But when you think about it, they're kind of just paying Al-Qaeda since they already send them money already. So it just becomes like a clean way of sending them money when you think about it. 7/7. 7/7 refers to the 7th of July 2005 London bombings, a series of 4 coordinated suicide attacks carried out by terrorists that targeted commuters traveling on London's transport during the morning rush hour. They used 3 homemade bombs aboard the London Underground trains in Inner London and another bomb on a double-decker bus. 52 people died, obviously aside from the bombers, 800 were injured. It was the UK's deadliest terrorist incident since 1988 and the UK's first Islamist suicide attack. All of these were homemade bombs, they packed them in their backpacks, generally a horrible incident. First AQ branch in Yemen. Kind of mentioned before, but Al-Qaeda was used to fight against separatists in southern Yemen during the 90s. A lot of these were Yemenis who had fought under Bin Laden in Afghanistan. They went back to Yemen, formed the Islamic Jihad in Yemen, helped the government against the left in Yemen. They were also infamous for their suicide bomber attacks against the US Navy at the port of Aden. So that's a bit of a throwback, but they were involved in that. Another aspect of them fighting for the government at the time was that the president of northern Yemen had promised them that they would implement Sharia law, and they kind of never did that. Therefore, they made their own group, and this group was obviously involved with Al-Qaeda, and they did these attacks against the US Navy, and of course they also against others in Yemen. Of course, the Yemeni government claimed that they'd shut these people down. They kind of didn't. Shit like that. 2002 Bali. The 2002 Bali thing refers to the bombings that occurred in Bali at a tourist district. 200 people died, including 88 Australians, 38 Indonesians, 23 Britons, and people of more than 20 other nationalities, 29 injured people. It was the worst act of terror in Indonesia's history. The Islamists who had done it were supposedly the Jamaah Islamiyah, some Islamist group in the area. Now where AQ comes into this is that a week after the blasts, Al Jazeera had an audio cassette that they put out that had a voice message from bin Laden that said that the Bali bombings were a direct retaliation for the support of the US war on terror and Australia's role in Timor. The recording, however, did not claim responsibility for the attack directly, though there's a former FBI agent that claims that al-Qaeda did finance the attack itself. Some other guy also confessed that al-Qaeda had sent him $30,000 to fund the bombings in Bali, offered to fight in Gulf War. Okay, we kind of touched on this before, but bin Laden did offer the Saudis to fight Saddam in Kuwait for them, instead of them calling in the US, which, yeah, obviously they called in the US instead because a bunch of Arab terrorists running around fighting an actual competent Arab government wasn't the brightest idea, to say the least. Salafist group for preaching and combat. The Salafist group for preaching and combat is/was an Algerian Islamist terrorist faction in the Algerian Civil War. Allegations of its links to Al-Qaeda do predate 9/11. They have similar ideas, similar ideology. All of the members share the general outlook, ideologically speaking. And after their leader, a leader got deposed, around 2003 they pledged allegiance to Al-Qaeda. And 2007 they changed their name officially to Al-Qaeda Organization in the Islamic Maghreb. They've been having an insurgency in the Maghreb region, generally speaking, and a lot of them are in the Saharan desert. I think that had a split off where they made a separate group. And of course, French secret services have also had reports that the group received funding from the country of Qatar. So make of that as you will. Harakat al-Mujahideen. Harakat al-Mujahideen is a Pakistan-based Islamist jihadist group that operates primarily in Kashmir and other parts of Pakistan. The group had links to bin Laden of Al-Qaeda and Mullah Omar of the Taliban. Of course, it's a terrorist organization. It's listed by the UN, the UK, the US, a bunch of states as well, similar to most AQ groups. It's thought to have thousands of supporters that are armed in Pakistani Kashmir and India's part of Kashmir and Doda regions. They use light and heavy machine guns, assault rifles, the typical arsenal. They're mostly based in Pakistan and Afghanistan, as mentioned before. Their leader lives in Islamabad, in the Pakistan's capital, very casually. He denies having had any contact with bin Laden. Though, according to the New York Times, Osama bin Laden's seized cell phones do actually implicate him having contact with bin Laden, and its bases and fighters shared with the Taliban over the years. They've had a part in that. So I don't know who you want to believe, bin Laden's cell phones or the guy saying he has nothing to do with it. AQ CIA double agents. Okay, this one is pretty crazy. It refers to Ali Abdul Saud Muhammad, who was in fact a double agent who worked for both the CIA and Al-Qaeda, technically speaking the Egyptian Islamic Jihad. He was an Egyptian. He was in the Egyptian military as well before being kicked out for being suspected of being an Islamist fundamentalist. He moved to the US and he was in the military and so on. And he took a lot of this military knowledge with him to train these terrorists in Afghanistan and help them plan the terrorist attacks against the US embassies in Africa, trained them to do hijackings, suicide bombings, IED bombs, all of that. He set up how the structures were supposed to be within the organization, also how to finance it. He set up a bunch of businesses to fund these cells in Africa, and it wasn't a difficult job for him. He also would pose as parts of Red Crescent and so on to be able to tour AQ members within the US to get more funding. And even when they'd have doubts, he would say to them straight up that he would need this sort of political power within the US to survive. Of course, over time, they caught him. They went through his apartment. They found evidence of not just terrorist activities, but also plans and scripts for al-Qaeda training. He had made plans to leave the country to meet with bin Laden again. And he actually got a life sentence without parole. He agreed on that. And generally speaking, we still haven't heard of him. We just know that he still awaiting a sentence, technically speaking. Some think that he is now giving information to the United States regarding Al-Qaeda, but nothing is really that known about him. Khobar Towers. The Khobar Towers refers to the Khobar Towers bombing in 1996, which it's a housing complex in Khobar in Saudi Arabia near the National Oil Company, Saudi Aramco's headquarters, and nearby the King Abdulaziz Air Base. And mostly the coalition troops were stationed here during their operations in Iraq. A truck bomb was detonated near the building, housing the United States Air Force's members. 19 U.S. Air Force personnel were killed, and 498 different nationalities were wounded. Now, officially speaking, the US statement at the time said that Hezbollah al-Hijaz was responsible, which is an Iranian affiliated group, not really Al-Qaeda. However, in 2004, the 9/11 Commission noted that bin Laden was seen being congratulated on the day of Khobar attack, and there were many reports earlier preceding the attack that bin Laden was seeking to facilitate shipment of explosives to Saudi. Though the US would make claims that no, it's actually Iran, and they would even speculate that Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, actually issued this attack. Though again, the United States Secretary of Defense at the time said that later on in 2007, he believes that Al-Qaeda rather than Iran was behind the truck bombings at the American military base. Of course, generally speaking, the US holds Iran responsible, not really Al-Qaeda. Turkestan Islamic Party. The Turkestan Islamic Party is a Uyghur Islamist militant organization founded in Pakistan. Its stated goals are to establish an Islamic state, not just in Xinjiang, but in general Central Asia and the Turkic countries. They're generally speaking considered to be not just big within the Islamist sphere, but also in general Al-Qaeda. They have a closely aligned relationship. They confirmed their loyalty to Al-Qaeda in 2016. Al-Qaeda's media centers do distribute their propaganda, and they generally endorsed independence for Xinjiang to separate and create an East Turkestan independence. The leader of Al-Qaeda at the time also confirmed that Afghanistan's war after 9/11 included the participations of these Uyghur groups, and that they were provided with refuge in Afghanistan under the Taliban. And this was also right before they did an attack on the Chinese embassy in Bishkek. And the Turkestan Islamic Party did partake in Syria along with this Al-Qaeda affiliation in Syria. They're pretty well organized. They've played major roles in Syria itself. They have not just links to Al-Qaeda itself, they have links to the Islamic movement of Uzbekistan and the Pakistani Taliban. And even the US has designated it as having received training and financial assistance from Al-Qaeda. After the fall of Syria's former regime, most of their factions in Syria announced their dissolution and that they were incorporated in the newly formed Ministry of Defense in Syria, ran by former Al-Qaeda affiliates. Telegram. Well, I don't think there's any surprise that these groups will use messaging apps and so on to communicate and spread their messages and so on. And of course, an app like Telegram, which is known for its encryption, of course, has been used by a lot of these groups, not just for messaging between each other, but generally speaking to promote their ideas, promote their stuff, and so on. And these are mostly to recruit new members and get more funding and so on. They even went as far as to developing their own encrypted software, such as Mujahideen Secrets program, which was supposedly developed by Al-Qaeda in 2007. ISIS also had their own encryption programs and so on. It's kind of insane, but yeah, these terrorist groups will try to lay low in cyberspace, and they will make their own encryptions and all that. I think Telegram has actually helped in some cases against terrorist groups, but it's generally speaking an encrypted messaging platform. as-Sahab. As-Sahab Media, or the Cloud, is the media wing of Al-Qaeda's leadership based in Pakistan and Afghanistan, and it mostly features what you'd think, speeches and so on, sermons, and also footage from their operations they carry out. Most of these videos are in Arabic. Some come with English subtitles. They produce documentary videos of their own. Its first production was actually made by an American known as Adam Yahya Gadan, also known by them as Azam the American, who was a senior operative, cultural interpreter, spokesman, and media advisor for them. Yeah, he's a fully fledged American. He converted to Islam in 1995 in California, in LA. And yeah, he's helped to make documentaries. He thought to have helped Bin Laden with one of the videos. Beyond that though, as-Sahab sub-channels are divided into respective geographical regions, and each channel will have specific footage and speeches for each of their areas. There's one for West Africa, there's one for the Maghreb, there's one for the Arabian Peninsula, there's one for East Africa. It's basically their CNN, okay? It's not that deep. Bin Laden denied the 9/11. Okay, so he didn't deny its occurrence, but this is a thing not a lot of people know about. He did initially deny responsibility for them. He praised the attacks. Don't have any doubts about that. He liked that the attacks happened. And he would say that he didn't plan the attacks and that he had been living in Afghanistan, and so he would follow the rules and not do such operations. And later on, he even justified it. Generally speaking, if you remember the letter to America and so on, he does state that civilian targets are justified and all that, and that was after 9/11. Shortly before one of the presidential elections in the US, 2004, in a taped statement, Bin Laden publicly acknowledged their involvement in the attacks on the US and claimed a direct link to the attacks. He said that the attacks were carried out because they are quote-unquote a free people who do not accept injustice and want to regain freedom for their nation. In an audio message that surfaced on the internet in 2006, the speaker was alleged to be Bin Laden, defends an individual who was undergoing a trial for his participation in the September 11 attacks, says that the guy is not responsible for it, and that he had entrusted this attack on 19 other people. So he's essentially taking responsibility for 9/11, so him denying it initially doesn't really mean anything. Londonistan. Well, it's not really a meme at this point, is it? Londonistan refers to London having not just a lot of Muslims, but generally speaking, that it has the function as a base for radical Islamists at this point. And I'm not just referring to Dawah Tube and Muhammad Hijab and religious preachers or whatever. Also, a lot of these organizations, they have a base in the UK. If you find some outlandish Islamist position on Twitter, very extreme one, the location is always almost bound to be London at this point. It's become a meme at this rate. So I don't think there even needs to be a lot of talk about this. The Ikhwan connection. Well, the Ikhwan stands for the Brotherhood, which refers to the Muslim Brotherhood, which has undoubtedly influenced Al-Qaeda to some extent, mostly through one of their former leaders, Sayyid Qutb, who influenced Al-Qaeda, not just ideologically speaking, but almost on a personal level, through the fact that Zawahiri, one of their leaders of AQ, was one of Qutb's students, not the main one, the brother of Sayyid Qutb. He was the mentor of Bin Laden as well, and he was the leader after Bin Laden's death. So a lot of this is through the family. Zawahiri even would pay homage to Qutb in his works, and Qutb's global jihad idea is something that Al-Qaeda took very much. Bin Laden was also an acquaintance of Qutb's brother, and they would attend his lectures all the time. A lot of these major AQ leaders, generally speaking, would read a lot of his works. Generally speaking, he is the role model for a lot of these people. Yeah, ideologically speaking, they come from the Muslim Brotherhood. AQ in Bosnia. Okay, so yeah, Al-Qaeda was technically speaking in Europe for a bit, since there was an Al-Qaeda branch based in Bosnia and Herzegovina during the Bosnian War in the 1990s. And during the Bosnian War, the Bosnian government at the time wanted support from the Islamic world. So this obviously brought in a lot of these people who fought in Afghanistan. 500 to 1,500 foreign fighters. And between 1993 and 1996, Bin Laden was thought to have visited these camps in Bosnia. And of course, Al-Qaeda, through charities and so on, funneled millions of dollars of money to Bosnia to train fighters and so on to fight, and even maintain an office in Zagreb, in the capital of Croatia. Al-Qaeda remained there, and after the war, they remained through a Saudi charity organization there, and it essentially functioned as a logistical and financial support infrastructure for Al-Qaeda, until of course the US and Bosnia's government later on shut these things down. They figured out that Al-Qaeda was receiving money and so on from Bosnia. AQ in Tajikistan. Okay, so this is a bit of a mess. In Tajikistan, during the war, certain groups would obviously go up and so on. The Islamic movement of Tajikistan is one of them. The thing that makes this a mess is the leader of this group is also the leader of the Islamic movement of Uzbekistan, and largely speaking the Islamic movement of Central Asia. And yeah, it's led by an al-Qaeda guy, former Soviet paratrooper who went to Afghanistan, got super radicalized, came back, started promoting this Islamist fundamentalism. Yeah, he partook in the Tajikistani civil war. They failed with their objectives. The government in that war won against the rebels. And of course, since he runs all these other groups, they've carried out attacks in Central Asia. Their notable attack is that they took responsibility for an attack in 2009 that targeted police. There were about 11 to 50 civilian casualties, and one Central Asian police officer was killed. To say the least, these guys aren't really quality terrorists, to say the least. And the Kyrgyz defense minister said that several hundred of these people are in Afghanistan. Yeah, 100 in Badakhshan province and 1,500 in Paktia province. So to say that they're like a small group, I think it's kind of fair. Ansar al-Islam. Okay, so Ansar al-Islam, another group. This one is Kurdish, funnily enough. Yeah, it's basically AQ in Kurdistan. It tried to establish an Islamic Emirate of Kurdistan. It wanted to take all of Kurdistan as an Islamic state. It was basically crushed by the West during this time. The group is a designated terrorist organization like all these other AQ groups. One of their leaders was trained by al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. Another one was killed by the US for his ties with al-Qaeda. Of course, the US also said that they're independent, but they do receive assistance from al-Qaeda, and it's not really a branch of the group. Funnily enough, though, it has the nickname the Kurdish Taliban, because all of them are essentially just Kurds who fought for the Taliban in Afghanistan, and they're very similar to the Taliban in how they both established Islamic Emirates with Sharia law. Both of them were Islamist, but had some nationalism, similar to how the Taliban had Pashto nationalism, and these guys had the Kurdish one, and both of them were harshly persecuted non-Muslims. 3/11. Okay, so 3/11, another terrorist attack. It refers to the 2004 Madrid train bombings that were coordinated almost at the same time, bombings against the commuter train system of Madrid in the morning of 11th of March 2004, 3 days before Spain's elections. The explosions killed 200 people, injured around 2,500. The bombings were the deadliest terrorist attack carried out in the history of Spain. The attacks were carried out by individuals who supposedly just opposed the Spanish involvement in the 2003 US-led invasion of Iraq. Where al-Qaeda fits in this, one of the people investigated that were put on trial were suspected of having ties to al-Qaeda, and a lot of claims were going around that this was linked to al-Qaeda. Per the investigations and probes, they couldn't find any links directly going to al-Qaeda, although on 14th of March 2004, a purported spokesman for al-Qaeda in Europe took responsibility for the attacks, though they said that there was no any evidence still of an al-Qaeda involvement, and that these groups that were claiming responsibility, the US officials would note that they were not really reliable. The Independent, though, did report that those who invented that sort of bomb that they used had been taught in camps in Afghanistan, which would have meant that, yeah, they would have had to be AQ members, or at least associated in some way. AQ-Iran alliance. Okay, so this is a big allegation that would run around as well, which of course some truth to it. The allegation that Iran helped al-Qaeda stems from the 90s, where there were a lot of talks that they had met up with the al-Qaeda fighters in Sudan and shared intelligence and training with them to supposedly fight Israel, and that they would support them financially with weapons, explosives, whatever, through the Lebanese Hezbollah group. And of course, during the Bosnian War, as mentioned before, Iran was also involved there with helping the Bosnians. And of course, through that, they would have to come across the al-Qaeda members, and this would mean that they would send them ammunition, weapons, supplies through these Sudan-based charity organizations affiliated with al-Qaeda. Of course, after 9/11, the Iranian government attempted to suppress information regarding its past relations with al-Qaeda. Iran detained hundreds of al-Qaeda operatives that entered the country after the 2001 invasion of Afghanistan. Though Iran held most of them under house arrest, the US did not like that they didn't know anything about it. Of course, this led to the allegations that Iran was involved in the bombings, were assumed to be from al-Qaeda in 2003 in Saudi Arabia. Though what makes this kind of suspicious, though, is that between 2001 and 2010, several Al-Qaeda leaders were given asylum in Iran. A lot of these leaders were also killed in Iran itself. Therefore, they would, accuse Iran of allowing Al-Qaeda to establish a base of operation within the country, although Iran would deny it. And this is not even that long ago. And this is still being talked about in the UN. 2023 in the United Nations Security Council named one of the de facto leaders of Al-Qaeda of being in Iran. And this was again confirmed in 2024 at the United Nations. So make of that as you will, I don't know. It's very suspicious, to say the least. 1993 World Trade Center. Alright, so this is like the prequel to 9/11. We have the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, which was another terrorist attack carried out. What a surprise, right? Carried out in the United States, February 26, 1993. Van bomb detonated below the North Tower of the World Trade Center complex in Manhattan. It was supposed to kill like 10,000 people by taking down both the skyscrapers. It failed to do so. I mean, it was still bad because it killed 6 people, including a pregnant woman, and it caused over 1,000 injuries. Yeah, 50,000 people were evacuated from the buildings that day, so most people were unharmed, or at least didn't die. Now, what makes this event rather dumb is the fact that the whole bomb process was under supervision of the FBI. An FBI informant did literally record his telephone conversation with his FBI handlers. In the tapes, after the bombings, this guy alleged that an unnamed FBI supervisor declined to move forward on a plan that would have used phony powder to fool the conspirators into believing that they were working with genuine explosives. It's blunder central, that's all I'm gonna say. Horas al-Din. Okay, so this is like the Nusra Front 2, the sequel. Yeah, it's basically since TS's whole like jihadism in one country, these other guys didn't want that. They still wanted the global jihad thing and being affiliated with Al-Qaeda itself. So this is more of like a loyalist faction they created. They're kind of still around. I mean, as at the time I'm recording this, another one of their guys got killed by the United States. Yeah, it's something. Though apparently they declared their dissolution. So technically speaking, they're not even supposed to exist right now. Yeah, I don't even know what to say about these guys. They're just Al-Qaeda 2 in Syria, because the old one just stopped doing global jihad. Inspire. Okay, this might sound like some wholesome Chungus thing. It's not. It's the English language online magazine published by Al-Qaeda. So it's not so wholesome. The magazine is one of the many ways that Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula uses the internet to reach the people. And yeah, a lot of people are, well, I wouldn't say a lot, but a bunch of people are influenced by this stuff. And these magazines do actually show bomb-making instructions and making people actually carry out attacks. It's mostly aimed at young British and American readers. And they have translated messages from Bin Laden. And they have articles just encouraging terror attacks on the US, calling for like killing pedestrians and civilians, like super evil shit. I mean, they have an article written by a guy who talks about he's proud to be a traitor to America, and he was like killed by a predator drone attack in Yemen. So that should kind of tell you that the crowd this is, generally speaking. It's like, it's terrorists who die, okay? Like, and it tries to just tell people like they're invincible, they don't really have that many casualties, they're holy warriors, whatever. They're like Rambo. Obviously, it doesn't really reflect in reality. Yeah, don't be inspired by it. Inspire. Islamic Emirate of Yemen. Okay, so this is a rather unknown thing. Yeah, the Islamic Emirate of Yemen is a real thing that happened. Al-Qaeda did establish a state for a brief period after 2015, and they wanted to take over all of Yemen. This was during the time when the Saudi intervention had begun in Yemen. So the Saudis didn't prioritize fighting Al-Qaeda, and they even wanted them around to fight the Houthis in Yemen, and they supported it. The thing is, though, Al-Qaeda obviously have their own agenda in mind, so took that the moment of opportunity, took as much territory as they could, tried to establish a government that would follow their strict interpretation of Islamic law. And of course, a lot of abuses occurred, a lot of violent ones. They stole a lot of money, to say the least. They robbed the banks and so on. They would put taxes on a lot of these national companies. They got support from local tribes by providing them food and water in exchange for them fighting for them. And they got a lot of success initially. And as I said, they got a lot of money through their extortions and all of that. And they used this money, of course, to fund their operations. And, it didn't really last long. They kind of fell off with these attacks, and it's why it's a short-lived state that you've never heard of. So, L.
No, I know we should all just let bygones be bygones, but that ain't the way it's gonna be. I was programmed to kill your ass, and that's exactly what I'm gonna do. You hear?
You're just a slave, a pawn with no free will of its own, is that it?
Free will. Pitiful humans. War, segregation, hatred. Is that what you've done with your free will, boy? Don't you lecture me with
$1 microphone, new microphone.
We'll see, you red ribbon redneck.
Alright guys, new microphone, $1 microphone, it's all good now. Let's get into the third layer, Jamaah Islamiyah. Okay, another terrorist group linked to Al-Qaeda. Jamaah Islamiyah is the Southeast Asian branch, essentially, based in Indonesia, but also active in Malaysia and the Philippines and Singapore. They've been clamped down a lot by the local Indonesian government, and they even work with the Islamists in the Philippines and so on. Nothing that special. 2004 Australian Embassy. Okay, this part refers to the Australian Embassy bombing in Jakarta, the capital of Indonesia, by the aforementioned Jamaah Islamiyah group that we mentioned previously. They killed 9 people. Apparently, a lot of people dispute about how many civilians died and so on. And yeah, this suicide bombing did impact the other embassies, apparently, close by ones, like the Greek embassy. Diplomats were wounded, and it caused damage to the nearby Chinese embassy as well. Paul Johnson. Okay, so Paul Johnson is Paul Marshall Johnson Jr., an American helicopter engineer. Was born in New Jersey. He came to work in Saudi Arabia with the Saudi attack helicopters, and unfortunately he was stopped at a fake police checkpoint in Saudi, and they abducted him. His kidnappers called themselves Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. They posted a video of him blindfolded in 2004, threatening to kill him unless all Al-Qaeda prisoners were released from the jails within 72 hours. And after that, the American and Saudi authorities were trying to negotiate something. They said they wouldn't comply with the demands. Later on, Al Arabiya and CNN reported that Johnson had been decapitated, and this was based on a report. There were photographs of the murder posted on the internet. Saudi security officials later found his head in a refrigerator in a house in Riyadh, following a shootout in the same city, which killed his abductors and so on. The brothers of the abductor were later detainees at the Guantanamo Bay detention camp. Global call for Islamic resistance. This refers to an article that appeared on the internet around 2004-2005, which was written by an Al-Qaeda suspect. He basically talks about the next stage of jihad will be characterized by terrorism, not just the main groups or whatever, but by what he calls leaderless resistance. There are very small individual or small autonomous groups that will be more open front in their confrontation, and without seizing any territory or whatever, and this would be the way they would actually do a lot of this stuff. And even said that the American occupation of Iraq inaugurated a period of rescuing the jihadi movement when everyone thought it was over, because they took advantage of this. And he even said something a bit crazier. Apparently he acknowledged that Islamists should exploit democracy to achieve their objectives, and trying to leverage democratic institutions to sway Muslim sentiments. Ansar Baytul Maqdis. Okay, this is another Al-Qaeda group. This one though is from the Sinai, Egyptian peninsula part bordering Israel and Palestine. It was linked to Al-Qaeda. Obviously they fought against Egypt and messing up their gas pipeline. Funnily enough though, this group didn't last too long being an Al-Qaeda affiliate, because eventually they pledged an oath to ISIS, and they merged with ISIS fully and became the Sinai province of ISIS, essentially. Not really a long-lasting Al-Qaeda group like the others on this iceberg. AQ Hamas ties. Okay, so yeah, at some point when Hamas was way smaller and more relevant, Al-Qaeda liked Hamas in Palestine. They agreed with each other a lot. They had similar views in some aspects. But Al-Qaeda had a very big line that Hamas should not partake in the Palestinian politics at all and shouldn't partake in the elections. They don't like that stuff in general. They see it as non-Muslim or whatever. And Al-Qaeda also generally has the view that the Palestinian question is a Muslim one and not really a Palestinian business. Now, when Hamas did participate in the elections and partake in the Palestinian political context, Al-Qaeda turned on Hamas and they even did attacks in Gaza against foreign activists and so on, which pissed off Hamas, and they've had issues with each other ever since then. Al-Qaeda even calls Hamas a Zionist because they see them accepting the PA as being them accepting Israel, because it means they want to partake in the United Nations, and that means, yeah, they're Zionists somehow. Yeah, generally very absurd. I don't really have much to say about this. It's that don't participate in elections or you're literally a traitor to your religion. That's essentially the whole line here. Okay, I don't even know how to pronounce this. I will just call this the theological argument, whatever the fuck you want to call it. So have you guys ever watched Yu-Gi-Oh? You guys remember the duels they used to have and how intense it was, and they just throw cards at each other and freak out? You guys remember that? Okay, so now what if I told you Al-Qaeda and ISIS literally did that on each other instead of just killing each other immediately or whatever? That's the first thing they did. I want you guys to just realize that Al-Qaeda and ISIS argued with each other about who was in the right, religiously speaking. Like the two biggest terror orgs of all time are just casually dueling with debates and shit. You can't make this shit up, bro. They literally did Yu-Gi-Oh for Syria. I want you guys to just let that sink in. Do whatever you want with that. Straight up. AQ Houthi ties. Okay, this one doesn't really have that much to it. There's not really much evidence of it. It's essentially that there's a suspicion that Al-Qaeda and the Houthis in Yemen have an alliance because they didn't clash too much with each other aside from some bombings and suicide attacks. Or maybe that the Houthis tolerate some Salafists in some aspects. I don't know. Maybe that's it. I have no idea. GCC funding AQ. I mean, yeah, a lot of this has been talked about since 9/11 a lot. It's that Al-Qaeda definitely gets its funds from somewhere, and the Gulf countries are one of the main centers of this. They get a lot of fundraisings in the Gulf countries. So it's not just Qatar, as we've mentioned previously, but also Saudi and so on through charities. And a lot of these large international Gulf charities donated money to these groups. And this was investigated a lot. Now, people will argue how much are the states complicit in this, how much did even the charities know where the money went, and so on. So a lot of this is to be investigated, to say the least. Though a lot of people will allege that the Gulf countries did in fact aid Al-Qaeda. Charity organizations. I mean, yeah, kind of like we mentioned the previous thing, they get a lot of fundings through charities, though it's not limited to the Gulf or Qatar. The thing is, in 2002, when they seized documents in the raids in Bosnia, they found out that Al-Qaeda exploited charities a lot across the globe. And this is how they got their money in. They notably exploited the International Islamic Relief Organization and the Muslim World League, and they had connections to Al-Qaeda associates worldwide, including the leadership, and this was everywhere, to say the least. Of course, the Middle East was a big one, and I think that was the main base for all the funding, to be honest. Not so much the West, though it also persisted in the West. Kitab online? Bro, I'ma be fucking real. I try to find this shit everywhere on the internet. I couldn't find anything that really implied anything about this website. It seems like an Islamic library. I could be wrong, and it has extremist content, or it had at some point. Genuinely have no idea. Maybe Al-Qaeda hacked it at some point. I have zero idea about this at all. No way for me to research this. So assume anything, bro. Maybe they put up some anime poster on there. I don't know. Kataib Abdullah Azam. Yeah, another group. This time it's in Lebanon. It's named after one of the old heads in this Islamist movement that fought in Afghanistan. And yeah, they're the Al-Qaeda branch in Lebanon. Say the least, they've caused a lot of things in that area, in Syria as well, in Lebanon, in the camps. Funnily enough, though, the group was founded by a Saudi and has networks in a bunch of other countries. So I wouldn't say this is per se the Lebanese branch. It's more that it's an Al-Qaeda branch in Lebanon itself. AQ in Iraqi Kurdistan. Okay, so on top of there already being a group associated with Al-Qaeda in the area, there also is the more literal org that's more close to it central-wise, the Kurdistan Brigades. Yeah, they're the official Kurdish branch of Al-Qaeda. They've done a lot of attacks in northern Iraq. It was founded by former Ansar al-Islam militants. Its ranks includes Kurds, obviously. A lot of them are from Kirkuk, apparently. Some are from Iran. And though, funny enough, they criticized ISIS and said that they shouldn't join it and Kurds should not join that at all, which I find pretty funny. Ansar Ghazwatul Hind. Okay, as if this iceberg isn't ridiculous enough, with Kurdish AQ, Lebanese AQ, just all over the place, we have them in India as well now. This is the Kashmiri branch of Al-Qaeda, technically speaking. Though they're critical of Pakistan and they're critical of these other groups that are present, and they've also threatened to basically take India as a whole, not just Kashmir, and to get rid of the Hindus or whatever and make an Islamic state present. Though, funnily enough, it doesn't act too much like AQ because it does emphasize that they want to have Shia-Sunni unity, and that somehow this would, they would just have an Islamic state and Sharia law and not have democracy, and they would just do their own little thing. The thing is, though, that they have kind of done an allegiance thing to Al-Qaeda, and they did announce allegiance to the Taliban after they took over Afghanistan. So, I don't know. I do think they're actually associated to Al-Qaeda, and they probably aren't too chill with the non-Sunni population. I could be wrong, but I don't know. I have doubts. I have big doubts. Voice of Jihad. Okay, so this is a website, well, actually the official website of the Taliban, funny enough. And this is where they'll, they announce stuff or whatever. Though now it's changed its name since they did take Afghanistan over, so now it's renamed to Official Voice of Afghanistan. Nothing that special, it's just that. Chirpwire. Okay, so I didn't even know Chirpwire existed, but it's supposed to be an encrypted social media app that's very similar to Facebook. Now the thing is, Chirpwire did have Al-Qaeda present. Their media channels and so on would post on Chirpwire, which is kind of fucking absurd to think about, because imagine you basically scroll on Facebook or wherever, then you get like al-qaedanews.org, you like just pop up, and then you're just talking about blowing people up or whatever. Kidnapping economy. Yeah, guys, at this point, AQ doesn't get a lot of money through charities. They get a lot of it through kidnapping people and getting the ransom payment. And a lot of these are done by European governments and so on. And at this point though, they don't even do the kidnappings themselves as you think. Like, you think AQ would go out of their way, kidnap people, demand money or political demands and get that. They actually don't even do that. They outsource this to other people. So they outsource this to some random thugs or whatever. They do this and AQ gets the money in the end. And apparently they get at least under $25 million in ransom money since 2008. That's a high fucking amount, dude. That's like over $100 million since not too long ago, dude. This is like psychotic. No one talks about ransom payments and kidnappings done by Al-Qaeda at this point. It's buried a lot because most people don't want to say that they, most countries don't want to say they paid up money, because it does save the image of a guy being killed, but at the same time you're also paying a terrorist group to continue their operations. Sawt al-Jihad. Yeah, this literally just means voice of jihad, again, just like the Taliban one, but it was also the name of the online journal published by Al-Qaeda in the 2000s. It's probably referring to that, but it doesn't really run anymore, so try to figure that one out. Management of Savagery. Okay, this one is a big thing. It's basically a book that was published to be like a strategy guide for Al-Qaeda on how to create a new Islamic caliphate. And this is something even ISIS has used. A lot of these groups use this as their instruction, essentially their strategy guide. In this book, they describe 3 states of jihad. The first one is fixation and empowerment, or the will of the enemy would be broken by the destruction of vital economic and strategic targets. What they mean by this is, for example, in Muslim countries, they would destroy oil facilities or tourism infrastructure. For example, Bali, 2005, when they were attacking tourist spots and just doing a lot of these violent attacks, and then putting security on these areas will weaken the powers of the state, whatever, and they spread out and they lose effectiveness, and that Salafis would then take advantage of the security vacuum and launch an all-out battle, disperse them, and extreme violence should be done or whatever. That's what they say. Obviously don't condone violence, but that's essentially what they're saying in their guides. Also, part of this stage is getting as much attention as they can, media strategy that seeks that's supposed to promote this stuff, justify it with Islamic law, and they should free other jihadis and so on. Just do a lot of damage is basically what that is. Stage 2 is administrations of savagery, as they call it. So basically, in the breakdown of order, the law of the jungle will be going on, and jihadists should take advantage of this to win popular support with savagery. So more violence, more strength, and at the same time, they will enforce Sharia and provide basic services, for example, with food and medicine. So they become reliant on them. The third and final stage, as they call it, is the empowerment. The areas that they administer will become the new caliphate, and that these areas will be ruled by a single ruler, and this will be an Islamic state, and he will unify all of these destroyed areas with his caliphate. Because of that, they will win their hearts and minds and gain legitimacy for essentially forcing a rule upon these people and being their last hope. It's actually pretty psychotic, I'm not gonna lie, but you can see this with a lot of these groups. With ISIS, for example, a lot of it was done like that, and this is still out there. A lot of groups look at this as their basis. It's pretty fucked up. You're gonna get savaged the fuck out of.
في سبيل الله قد سرنا وأعلنا الجهاد قم ودع عنك الرقدا إنه الإسلام عاد في سبيل الله قد سرنا وأعلنا الجهاد نحن بالرشاش عدنا نملك اليوم القيادة ومشينا صحوة الجيل جموعا وفرادا نحن بالرشاش عدنا نملك اليوم القيادة ومشينا صحوة الجيل جموعا وفرادا ما عرفنا العيش إلا عنفوانا وجلادا قم ودع عنك الرقادا إنه الإسلام عاد في سبيل الله قد سرنا وأعلن.
Who's that Pokemon? Allahu Akbar.
Let's finish this already. Anyways, without further ado, let's get right into it. AQ Madkhali Alliance. This is not really anything that concrete. This is mostly about the fact that they generally are from the same strand of Islam, Salafism. Although Madkhalis don't have a rebellious attitude at all, they think all leaders are chosen by God, therefore you should follow your government and be loyal to them. AQ doesn't share that, though they share a general worldview, so some people assume that there's a genuine tie between them, at least ideologically speaking. Your citizenship is under my feet. So this isn't a reference to a known al-Qaeda clip that was posted by Faris al-Zahrani, who made a lot of audio recordings and such. Your citizenship is under my feet is a speech by him where he denounces his own Saudi citizenship because he transcends nationality, right? He thinks that there's an Islamic nation and that they'll share this. It's a pretty known clip. Saudis who joined ISIS quoted this clip when they burnt their Saudi passports. He's also known for making a lot of content generally, so he also has clips where he rationalizes killing police and military personnel using religion and different scholars and ideological thinkers and so on. Zawahiri killed Abdullah Azam. So we kind of mentioned this with Maktab al-Khidmat, they would collect money and so on, and that belonged to Abdullah Azam, who was fighting in Afghanistan at the time. A lot of people suspected Zawahiri killing him, and Azam's own son-in-law accused Egyptian Islamic Jihad of killing his father-in-law for issuing a fatwa that once the Russians were ejected from Afghanistan, it would not be permissible for us to take sides, which obviously would have bothered Zawahiri, who had this global jihad in mind. Worldofislam.net. Okay, I can't find this shit. Guys, I'm gonna be real. This is gone, okay? This website is just straight up gone. It's an old website that used to post Al-Qaeda propaganda, but it's like gone from the face of the internet now, so good luck finding anything on it. FSB agents. Yeah, so Al-Qaeda was present a lot in Russia during the whole Chechen conflict and so on. And yeah, one of the tactics the Russians concluded with doing in the end was infiltrating them like crazy, sending agents into their movements, screwing them over from within and so on. And this is actually how they ended the Caucasus Emirates insurgency in Russia itself. A lot of it was through the FSB's infiltrations and infiltrating all these insurgent groups. And they killed the leadership through this as well, the Caucasus Emirate. 6 easy steps to counter Al-Qaeda. Okay, this one is a pain in the ass to find. I don't know how to find it. Some on Reddit said that this is just an anti-Al-Qaeda publication list or whatever, or a series of it. But when I Google it myself, I see that it's an Al-Qaeda official who talked about this. Though the video is gone, so I don't know if it's some former Al-Qaeda member shitting on them or if it's in the current sense them talking in third person. So I have zero fucking idea. You guys can try to figure this one out. It's kind of a mystery at this point. Pankisi George. Yeah, so this refers to the Pankisi Gorg crisis. Look, Pankisi Gorg is a region in Georgia that it had a spillover from the Chechen War. And the US and Russia both were very concerned about Al-Qaeda being present in this area. And it turns out they're kind of right, because this whole area was filled with Arabs that came through the war. George Bush said that Al-Qaeda is operating these areas, would operate close with those people. The US supported Georgia in doing operations in these areas to clean it up. And so they did, and it was like a huge crackdown that occurred. They captured a dozen Arab militants. There was a huge crackdown in Georgia, and their corpses were everywhere. Essentially, they found that there were 2 Algerians working with chemical and biological weapons there as well. And this isn't like too long ago. This quit around 2005, so it wasn't that long ago when they finished these operations in the Caucasus. Nonetheless, this wasn't even in the Middle East. This was like bordering Russia and stuff. And yeah, Russia was also pretty concerned about it, so they had their nose in this. AQ Hezbollah ties. Okay, so this one has no concrete evidence. The US and Israelis like to claim this a lot, that they're on the low level. United States intelligence officials would also speculate that there had been contact between Hezbollah and low-level Al-Qaeda members who fled Afghanistan to Lebanon. Ali Muhammad did testify that Hezbollah trained Al-Qaeda operatives on how to use explosives early on, and that they might be using money laundering together, smuggling, and document forgeries together. But then again, major Al-Qaeda leaders like Zarqawi consider Shia to be apostates. And an additional thing is the fact that Hezbollah fought against Al-Qaeda affiliates in Syria. So I wouldn't say that their ties are anything that real. 2000 Kuala Lumpur Summit. Okay, this is pretty dumb, but yeah, in the year 2000 in Kuala Lumpur, Al-Qaeda had its summit, which had a lot of high-level Al-Qaeda members meeting in Malaysia. And this is where the USS Cole bombing and September 11th attacks were planned. The reason this is so dumb is the fact that the CIA and Malaysian authorities failed to identify people of the summit and arrest them before the attacks were carried out. They kind of let it happen. And they were all gathered in this big hotel room. Some businessman who owns the hotel also fought in Afghanistan. Before the meeting, the United States intercepted a telephone call to Yemen. Bin Laden had called that number dozens of times. And the CIA told Malaysian authorities to videotape the meetings. But here's the catch, guys. No sound recordings were made. And they could not identify any of them. So, yeah, this was pretty dumb. They just casually had a meeting in Malaysia. Nothing happened to them. And they did the attacks they planned to do. All of them. So, yeah, this is some blunder, to say the least. Failed Hosni Mubarak assassination. So we kind of mentioned this during the Sudan arc, but one of the reasons bin Laden had to leave Sudan was because of an assassination attempt on Hosni Mubarak, the president of Egypt at the time, and this was attributed to Egyptian Islamic Jihad. They failed, and Sudan was threatened, so they all got kicked out. Though there is an additional one, apparently, it claims that bin Laden planned to blow up Mubarak's plane, and that failed somehow in 1995. I've never heard of that. I couldn't find anything else on that, but apparently that's a thing. Assad funded AQ. Okay, so this comes from the early 2000s during the Iraq War, when Al-Qaeda members, most of them went through Syria And generally speaking, the US and Iraqi authorities accused Syria of aiding al-Qaeda, and that a lot of these attacks that occurred even in Jordan and elsewhere, that they were not just going through Syrian territory, but also receiving stuff from networks within Syria. Saif al-Adl in Somalia. So yeah, Saif al-Adl is the current de facto leader of al-Qaeda. He played an instrumental role in Somalia during the Battle of Mogadishu and so on. He established al-Qaeda training facilities in Somalia. He trained a lot of these tribes on how to fight the Americans. Yeah, he's very involved in that whole process in Somalia in the 90s. And he did say that Somalia was suitable to be an al-Qaeda base. So he set all of that up. He's also wanted by the Americans for a specific reason, not just training al-Qaeda operatives, but also Somali tribesmen who fought against the US in Mogadishu. AQ soldiers on Twitter. Okay, this is not anything surprising. Real ones remember when terrorists were all over that fucking website. But yeah, there are al-Qaeda soldiers casually on Twitter. There used to be ISIS on Twitter. I remember people used to ask them about anime, and they would be like, yeah, bro, we fuck with anime. So yeah, it's nothing that surprising. It's just mostly hidden by language barriers, and they don't always get suspended that easily. It takes a while. At Muraqabi. Yeah, so this is related to the AQ soldiers on Twitter thing. A top premier ideologue for Al-Qaeda, Abu Muhammad al-Maqdisi, was casually on Twitter until like a few months ago. Like he was just he was just casually on there. He was just ranting. He would beef with people. He would shit talk people. He would shit talk like other former AQ members for going astray. I mean, he's suspended now, so you know Twitter is actually dealing with that. It's not like before, but yeah, casually AQ on Twitter. That's another case of that. Al Jazeera collaboration. Taisir Aluni. Okay, so this refers to famous or infamous journalist, depends what you want to call him. Taisir Aluni, who was a journalist for Al Jazeera. He moved to Spain, and he's infamous for interviewing Bin Laden after 9/11. So he was convicted of terrorism charges. He also was the correspondent in Afghanistan, and he covered the destruction of the Buddha statues by the Taliban. He was arrested in Spain during the Madrid train bombings. In the aftermath of that, he got sentenced for 7 years imprisonment for being supposedly a financial courier for Al-Qaeda. And people defended as for free speech. They said, no, he's just interviewed him. It's not that bad. He's not involved with them. But again, what makes this weird, it's not just that he used to do that. He also interviewed Al-Qaeda affiliates in 2013. So he just went out of the jail or whatever, and he started just doing that shit all over again. So, and they trust him enough to have that interview. That's what I would say. So perhaps he's not, what do you call it? Perhaps not the most legit journalist out there. I don't know. Just a little suspicious. I don't know. Al-Ansar. Okay, guys, I'm fucking tired of this shit. This could be a million fucking groups. I don't know which one it is. It could be the guys in Africa. It could be the Kurds. It could be more Africans. I don't know. All these groups use similar names, both in Yemen, in Libya, Egypt, Morocco, like everywhere. They use the same fucking name. So I don't know which one it is. Just AQ number 5000. Okay, just go with that. That's what Al-Ansar is. That's my assumption. Advice and Reform Committee. So, you know, this sounds like a very wholesome Changis group. Nothing suspicious about it or whatever. You know, peaceful and constructive reform in Saudi Arabia doesn't sound too bad. That was their whole platform. But guess what? Al-Qaeda front, bro. Bin Laden worked with these guys to fucking, you know, be chill. Get his ways in. But yeah, that's straight up what that is. The guy who headed this was arrested. And yeah, they got investigated for being an Al-Qaeda front. Abu Abdul Rahman al-Maghribi in Afghanistan. Post 2021. Okay, so this is nothing confirmed. It's a lot of speculation, mostly due to the fact that he's married to Zawahiri's daughter, and his family lives in Afghanistan. And Zawahiri was killed in Afghanistan as well. The thing is, again, it's speculative. No one knows where he is, but it's kind of likely that he would live in the same country as his family. So people assume that he lives in Afghanistan, even currently, like after the Taliban take over, they're casually in Afghanistan. And this guy is also supposed to be the leader after the present leader. Biography of Distinguished Martyrs. There's another thing I can't really find. This is probably on the weird sides of the internet, but it's supposed to be a piece about those who died for Al-Qaeda, and it's, you know, written by Al-Qaeda. So yeah, I don't know how the fuck I'm supposed to find this. Whoever made this iceberg, bro, I don't have access to the deep web, bro. I can't go onto AQ forums and find this shit, dude. Message to those that left arms. This is another one. It's basically like, hey, yo, bitch ass, where'd you leave us, bro? We're gonna hunt you down. That's what I assume they're talking about. Or, you know, or, oh, you're a pussy, bro. Why are you leaving the cause? Type content. Again, I can't really find any of this. This is not in my reach of the internet. Nor would I want to click on it, bro. The fuck, do you think I want to be on a list? Like, yeah, get the fuck out of here, bro. Al-Qaeda triad ties. Okay, so I wouldn't say this is technically just about triads. It's mostly that, you know, Al-Qaeda and generally a lot of these sorts of groups, they need narcotics to stay afloat. They need that sort of trade, that sort of market going on to make the money, make ends meet. And this makes them in league with a lot of other criminal groups, including the triads. And the triads apparently didn't really fuck up their opium trade or whatever. And I think they might even have connections with the fucking cartel at this point. Like, yeah, a lot of these drugs go everywhere, and the money goes through, and they'll have chill ties with some of them. So that's what that's mostly about. It's not exclusive to the triad in Hong Kong and China or whatever. Pakistan tipped off bin Laden. So these are a lot of rumors. Again, nothing is too confirmed, but one of them is that Pakistan, at least intentionally, through former intelligence agency people, told the US about the location of bin Laden. But again, this is kind of controversial because most of the things that are being said is that Pakistan had either had an awareness and concealed it, or they had no idea that he was present, which either way is a blunder. And the US went ahead with this without them. This kind of implies that Pakistan knew and they told the US, you know, to kill him. Either way, it's a bit ridiculous, to say the least. Defunct jihadi forums. Yeah, there used to be a lot of forums for Al-Qaeda and also ISIS or whatever. All these jihadi groups, they had their own forums. And I've heard very absurd things, such as the fact that it was like MySpace with Al-Qaeda sprinkled all over it. And it's all these like jihadis on there talking about their day or whatever, or their activities. Which, dude, that sounds fucking bizarre, but that sounds fucking funny, I can't lie. But yeah, all these websites have been shut down by the US and other international intelligence agencies, so you can't really find them anymore. Dark web sites. Yeah, most of these terrorist groups, including Al-Qaeda and a lot of others, they are active in the dark web. And it makes sense because, yeah, they need finance or whatever, so they use this not just to do propaganda or whatever and promote their stuff, but also fundraising and financial transactions, mostly through crypto or Bitcoin or whatever you want to call it. There are recruitments that go on through the dark web, and also like tutorials on how to make bombs and weapons or whatever, and also buying weapons. Probably they probably do that through the dark web to some extent, but yeah, they're very active on the dark web. I don't know how they haven't been shut down. They might be shut down just like the other forums, but yeah, I'm not too sure. Where is the AQ in Sudan now? So, if you guys remember the Sudan arc, it ended with bin Laden and his allies being all kicked out of Sudan. Though, here's the thing, Sudan right now has a civil war, a very big one, and Al-Qaeda was very excited for that. And they have like a top Sudanese guy even talked about this, that they need to go into Sudan. It's in a perfect position now in the chaos. And this is not like something new. Bin Laden always talked about Sudan being a pivotal operation base. He really wants Sudan to be a center they have because of its position geographically speaking, and it's perfect for their expansionism. It bridges North and Sub-Saharan Africa, so that's the kind of the vision they have for Sudan, but we haven't really heard of anything from them right now. They do have operatives, I'm pretty sure, because they do have top members who are from Sudan, and they even have a military strategy set in place on how to do guerrilla warfare across Sudan. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with this, because it is a risk, to be fair. It is a genuine risk. Hamza bin Laden still alive. Okay, so in 14th of September 2019, Donald Trump confirmed that Hamza bin Laden had been killed in a US counterterrorism operation on the Afghan-Pakistan border region. Though, here is the catch. In 2024, so a bunch of years later, one of the resistance groups fighting the Taliban claimed that he was still alive. and that he's present in Afghanistan, and he leads Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan along with his brother Abdullah bin Laden, and still preparing attacks and so on. Overlapping martyrdom claims. So yeah, apparently Al-Qaeda has a problem with reporting martyrdom sometimes. You know, when a member dies, that's probably the righter term to use. And it's yeah, sometimes they say that they die, but it turns out they aren't dead. So if you want to know if someone's really dead, Al-Qaeda itself, the organization, kind of has to, you know, kind of confirm it. Because the death of a leader is never guaranteed. You have to wait and see for an actual announcement or whatever. Al-Ikhlas.net. So yeah, this is one of those websites that we kind of mentioned before. This has a lot of videos or whatever, a lot of audio, and it even had like, what do you call it? They had a fucking chat or whatever. They had an actual proper forum, and you could like do Q&As with Zawahiri, bro. Like there's some casual thing. And apparently this was kind of like a MySpace sort of social network. But again, this was shut down. This whole thing has been shut down. But this was a big thing back in the day, apparently. So just let that sink in, bro. There was MySpace for like suicide bombers. Let that sink in real quick. Yeah, it's fucking hilarious, isn't it? Black Hawk Down. Okay, so Black Hawk Down. This doesn't just refer to the movie that has that one fucking soundtrack used in every Filthy Frank video. That's like the funniest shit ever. But it refers to the actual battle that took place in Somalia. And yeah, people kind of understood later on that Al-Qaeda was involved in Somalia, and they even trained the Somali militia that actually shot Black Hawk down. So essentially speaking, yeah, Al-Qaeda technically was involved in the whole plot of that movie without people realizing it. And, you know, they had training operatives. They had a lot of members present in Somalia, apparently. Not too many, because it was still a small group, but they trained others to do stuff, and they themselves were involved to a lower capacity. Nothing game-changing, but nonetheless, they were present. AQ-ISIS split happened in 2006. Okay, yeah, so these aren't based on anything concrete. There were rumors that Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State of Iraq, it wasn't yet ISIS, Syria wasn't added yet, had split in 2006 after the formation of the Mujahideen Shura Council in Iraq by Al-Qaeda in Iraq and other Islamist groups. And apparently this formation, this is an allegation, right? There's nothing confirmed, but apparently it was not approved by bin Laden. Therefore, you know, this would have caused a split. That's the assumption. We don't know anything beyond that. Alright, layer 6. So we're approaching the end of this. Let's just finish this already. Al-Nusra wasn't the AQ branch in Syria. Abu Khalid al-Suri. So yeah, apparently one of AQ's closest affiliates technically didn't even create al-Nusra. He created Ahrar al-Sham, which is a different group. Yeah, he participated in the Syrian war, and he was super involved, and he was killed off by ISIS. They say it was friendly fire or whatever, but he wasn't officially in al-Nusra at all. And later on, when Nusra became HTS, Khoras al-Din was formed. That is a more of a proper AQ affiliate in Syria. That should be noted. Abu Musab al-Suri's websites. Yeah, so he's a big AQ affiliate. He had a lot of websites, a lot of lectures, and so on. And he is the guy who made the management of savagery. That whole thing, that was his doing. And yeah, this guy had a lot of content. I'm pretty sure it's wiped out. It might be out there somewhere, but yeah, he had a lot of websites back in the day, dude. It's psychotic. He always is like in a sketchy room as well, pointing at shit, writing shit. And the fact that he doesn't look like a typical Arab, he's more ginger, very white looking, makes it like a million times more absurd. Zawahiri intention let HTS defect. Yeah, so this is a rumor, but it's that the leader of Al-Qaeda at the time allowed HTS get rid of the AQ affiliation, which I can kind of see that being the case, even though Rasul and them had beef, simply because almost every AQ affiliated guy has kind of done that now, like the Taliban as well. They do the whole like, we're not affiliated, and then they get to be in the office, whatever, very chill. HTS currently runs Syria, so I feel like they would be okay with them not being full on AQ, publicly speaking. It's not implausible, to say the least. It's not implausible. Ukraine. Okay, this could be many things. I think it might be referring to the incident in Mali where Ukraine helped an Al-Qaeda linked group with attacking Russians and Mali's security. It could be that. And that was something that the Kiev Post like flexed or whatever, and then Ukraine started denying giving support or whatever. Or it could be the other thing, which is that a lot of Al-Qaeda members, especially the Chechen ones, pulled up to Ukraine to fight against the Russians there, within the Chechen ranks and so on, which isn't implausible, but I think it could be the Mali thing more specifically. Geo News / Rocket Chat. Okay, so Geo News apparently is a Pakistani media company. You know, whatever, it's doing its own little thing. I guess it's about news or whatever. But apparently they got infiltrated by Tehrik-i-Taliban Pakistan, which is the Taliban in Pakistan, and apparently, yeah, they spread a fuck ton of propaganda on there, and this became a big controversy. I don't know, too more than that. A lot of stuff is hard to find. Though Rocket Chat is different because that's more like Chirpwire. So yeah, I guess they just had a chat on there. What do you call it? Encrypted, like chatting platforms for AQ members. I guess that's what that was. Like WhatsApp for AQ people. I guess that's the best explanation you can have. Israel did Charlie Hebdo. Okay, so now we're reaching the more. Now we're reaching a bit more plausible. Is that the claim that Charlie Hebdo was getting paid by a Zionist lobby or something? That's also still absurd. But even if you go with that, this claim goes a bit further. It claims that, at least from what I'm hearing, it's that the guys who did the shooting themselves were involved with Israel to make Islam look bad. Which, yeah, I doubt it, because these things happen too often. You make fun of the prophet of Muslims, then, you know, Muslims will get mad, and some of them will kill, some of them will beat you, you know, stuff like that. So I doubt it's Israel, to be fair. Why was Abu Sulaiman al-Utaybi kicked out? Okay, so this guy is kind of special because he's the first defector from the Islamic State in Iraq. And apparently there's a lot of reasons, no one knows much of the specifics. He didn't like the leadership and how they operated. He saw them as very corrupt. They wouldn't really protect the locals as they claimed they would. And he saw it as very dysfunctional, and that it was very criminal, and that they ran prostitution rings. And he told the EQ leadership about this, and they didn't take him seriously. They thought he was even an agent for what he was saying. Apparently, as well, at some point, he was saying that Al-Qaeda had become, not Al-Qaeda, but ISIS, to be fair, because it wasn't that connected to Al-Qaeda at this point, that they were kind of schizophrenic in the sense that they were always talking about apocalypse and the end times and the Mahdi and all these things. And yeah, he kind of freaked them out, I guess, on top of all the crisis in the ranks. So he just went to Afghanistan and just dipped out of their whole thing. And of course, he was killed by the US because he was still fighting in terrorist ranks, but not with the Islamic State. Mullah Omar wanted to give up bin Laden. Okay, this is not really a secret. The Taliban at first refused to give up bin Laden, but later on they kind of reached this position where, you know what, we might give him to a neutral or a Muslim country and you guys can put him on trial. They were very ready to just throw him under the bus, simply because, you know, he got him in big fucking trouble for no reason. And I'm pretty sure even Mullah Omar would have been annoyed by him at that point. Like, yeah, just get rid of him already and Afghanistan can be spared of that whole issue. Obviously, though, the US didn't accept that proposal in the end because they didn't do it early on, and the invasion of Afghanistan occurred. Yeah, clearly that didn't happen, didn't occur. It is permissible to fight under banner of infidelity. Apparently, this is some AQ propaganda thing that I don't know about. I've never heard of this. I can't find anything on this. Apparently, it's like a propaganda thing. It talks about how they're allowed to temporarily be under like bad countries or whatever, infidel countries. So I don't know what the fuck that's about. A lot of these things are borderline impossible to find on the surface internet, on Google or whatever. Like, yeah, I don't know how to find any of these. Bin Laden equals Mahdi. Okay, dude, this is getting fucking like schizophrenic to the max, okay? So, for those who don't know, the Mahdi is a figure in Islamic eschatology. He's supposed to appear in the end of times to rid of the world of evil and injustice. He is supposed to be the descendant of Muhammad. So yeah, apparently the claim is that some people would say that bin Laden was like the Mahdi, like, or at least he was treated as one. But that dude, that's fucking crazy, dude. That's like you're treating some guy as like something from the end times, something prophetic, and he's just some like Saudi guy blowing up buildings, bro. Like, yeah, I don't know what the fuck went into people's brains during this time. AQ did 9/11 to collapse Taliban. This is another like schizo take, which is that Al-Qaeda intentionally did 9/11, not for anything else, but to just fuck over the Taliban, which makes me think, why would they want to do that? But then I kind of rationalized it in my head, because it's like, okay, maybe they want to take Afghanistan for themselves or whatever and make it their proper base. But yeah, there's nothing about this on the internet. You have to go by assumptions and rumors and stuff. This has no like concrete anything. But this is some like crazy fucking claim. You cannot like make the shit up. This is like a bit, yeah. I mean, you can't make the shit up. That's probably why I'm reading this right now. Now we're on the final layer. And don't worry, guys, I will add some extras in the end, so don't worry about it. Egyptians. Okay, guys, this is a bit of a fucking truth nuke right here. Al-Qaeda, despite being founded by a Saudi, technically speaking, was established by mostly Egyptians, led by mostly Egyptians. 2/3 of the fucking founders are Egyptians, and the whole group is inspired by Egyptian Islamists and is led by former Egyptian Islamic Jihad people. So fundamentally speaking, you can make the argument that this is a proper Egyptian terrorist organization that's just gotten out of hand. Plus, you know, the classic character Muhammad Atta was Egyptian as well, so, you know, you should note that. Bin Laden being the only Saudi as well makes it absurdly funny. I can't explain why, just as Stephen Paddock's forum accounts. Okay, so this is another crazy one. So you guys might not remember, but Stephen Paddock was the guy who did the 2017 Las Vegas shooting. And I remember this. It was like a crazy event, a massive shooting in Vegas by some guy, and the only picture of him we got was him with a girl drinking. But here's the crazy part. ISIS took responsibility for this, and no one understood why. And then apparently on forums, they said that he converted to Islam and became an IS lone wolf fighter. And you know, he went crazy for them, whatever. But his girlfriend said that he was an atheist and he suffered from alcoholism and he was just mentally not okay. And most people think that ISIS claimed it just to boost their relevance. But then again, it's not uncommon for ISIS to have some like crazy characters for no reason. They aren't like sane or whatever, or not sinning. So anything is possible. But Stephen Paddock as ISIS, that sounds a bit crazy. I don't know. That would have been psychotic, bro. AQ forum, Stephen Paddock. Someone should find his account, dude. You guys should leak all his shit. Leak what he did. Leak what his plans were, dude. Abu Musab al-Suri and the Algerians. Okay, so yeah, again, the funny white-looking guy. He was very close with Algerians, apparently. He wrote for magazines for the longest time. But I think he's ended up getting into beef with the Islamist leadership in Algeria, because he was having beef with the chief editor, and yeah, this got like out of hand. And the guy we had beef with was actually the Al-Qaeda's principal cleric in Europe. So their beef got out of hand, but nonetheless, his networking with Algerians was very massive. There isn't much info about it to look into, so this is all you can really find. Is like little Algerian magazine arc. Bubble Bobble. Okay, guys, so imagine this: you're a terrorist. You need to know how to fight, you need to train yourself, you need to prepare yourself for conflict. And you know, sometimes people use video games. Now, what video game would you use? Would you use Call of Duty? Would you use Counter-Strike? Would you use Battlefield? Would you use any like FPS game of a war? Something that gives you a sense of realism, some sense of war? No, apparently, I cannot confirm this, but apparently AQ fighters used Bubble Bobble as their training. And Bubble Bobble is like a wholesome little fucking game. I don't know why the fuck you'd use Bubble Bobble of all fucking games on earth to train yourself in guerrilla warfare and pure terrorism and mass killing. That's like, how do you even rationalize that, dude? It makes more sense to play like a Lego game than fucking Bubble Bobble, dude. None of this makes sense, bro. Why are these groups like this? I cannot comprehend the fucking Bubble Bobble being a terrorist game, dude. Malcolm X. Okay, a lot of people might ask, what is the connection between Malcolm X and Al-Qaeda? He was born way before them. And you'd be right, because there isn't any direct thing. Though, I'll tell you what is a thing. Al-Qaeda kind of fuck with him. Yeah, the former leader of Al-Qaeda, he liked Malcolm X, and when Obama was elected, he called Obama a race traitor and a hypocrite compared to Malcolm X. And he always likes Malcolm X. He calls him by his Arabic name. He calls him a symbol for honorable black Americans, and he attacks all these other black people in the US government as being race traitors and a lot of bad words. So yeah, it's not that surprising, but at the same time, it's a random ass connection. Most people wouldn't know about this. This is a very kind of buried. Al-Qaeda is not a real organization. Okay, this one is spicy. I've kind of held a lot of these takes myself, and it's that Al-Qaeda is generally not real. It's kind of a CGI thing. And by that, I don't mean that it's quite literally not a real group or a CGI like Avatar, the blue Avatar movie. I don't mean that. It's mostly that Al-Qaeda has benefited other groups. It's been very convenient to exist for certain big powers. And a lot of these groups have done the opposite function of a supposed liberatory group. They fucked over a lot of these places. And Al-Qaeda has never really attacked Israel. For example, a lot of people bring this up. Al-Qaeda never attacked Israel. It's attacked everyone that's fought against Israel. And that's another point people make with this whole take. And Osama's background is him being a wealthy Saudi that got along with everyone. So him doing a total switch up with his money, to just attack the West and whatever. And honestly, just bringing the US to the Middle East, making them run things proper. It will pose that question whether or not Al-Qaeda is really really about that sort of group. And this is a very common take I've heard my whole life. A lot of people will say this. It's not uncommon. So it makes sense that it's the final thing on the iceberg. It makes total sense. But guys, don't worry. Your boy got y'all covered. I've added a few extra haterist exclusive into this iceberg. And, we'll just get right into them. It's the best way to finish this is by having a bunch of stuff that no one wants to talk about. The Goon Fatwa. So, yeah, most people don't know about this. And I knew about this for many years. Bin Laden issued a thing, like a religious ruling, that said it is permissible to jack off in the most extreme circumstances. So just know that he out there has given a religious approval to busting a nut. And so if you guys ever feel bad about jacking off, know that he's given that approval. It's AQ approved to jack off in extreme cases. Now, speaking of gooning, another infamous case they have is the East Östling Goon Chamber. East Östling is a famous TikTok star, transgender Swedish woman, very famous in the Nordic countries, memed a lot, but there is a goon chamber named after her among the Al-Qaeda ranks, and yeah, it kind of is what you think. It is a goon chamber. A lot of things happen in those goon chambers. They have a similar function to the goon chambers in anime conventions and furry conventions. Is kind of a next step of that. It's the Al-Qaeda conventions, goon chambers. And of course, these conventions don't really happen publicly, so they're mostly in caves. So the quality of the goon chambers, I will not get into. They're very all over the place. There might be photo evidence, there might not be. Just trust me, this is a real thing. I have reports and sources. They will confirm this. E-girls. Yeah, so most people don't know this. They won't see the side of Twitter, or X as it's called now, but there are a lot of not just AQ e-girls, but HTS e-girls, just e-girls for all these different groups, and some of them don't even wear hijab, and that's the funniest part. And they'll rep some like crazy mass killers, like I've seen e-girls like chanting, demanding ethnic cleansing very casually. And no one talks about that, but yeah, e-girls are very evil, and they're very connected to all these terrorist groups. Some of them are hijabis, some of them are not. Some of them might be in a bikini calling for killing all non-Sunni Muslims. That's a real thing. I guarantee you, you can go look for it. You'll see all of it. It's all on Twitter, guys. It's probably on Reddit as well. It's probably on YouTube, just in Arabic, not in English or a common language that most of you guys speak. Bin Laden game collection. So yeah, most people don't know this, but Bin Laden was a gamer and he had a lot of games. But I'd like to specify something very specific. And it's not that he played Half-Life like me or CS like me, but he also played stuff like Mario 64, and more importantly, this is the most important part, erotic games. Bin Laden was out there playing goon games, and we don't know the titles, as the CIA refused to reveal the titles because of copyright content, but apparently had a bunch of porno games and videos. So I wonder what the fuck he was even like. What was he playing, bro? Was he playing like 18 plus visual novels? What was he playing, dude? Was he playing like hentai games? Like those flash games? Like what was he playing? And the world will never know. They won't ever tell us what goon games he had. What was the goon games preferred by these terrorist organizations? We will never know. Bin Laden's animated movies. So this in the same category. They found out he had a lot of movies, but he preferred animated ones. And look, you know, I get it. He killed a lot of people. He blew up a lot of people. But man, dude, his taste in movies is kind of fire, bro. He had Ants, bro. You guys know Ants, bro. That's a fire movie. Cars, bro. Shout out Lightning McQueen, bro. He's the goat, bro. Like he understood that. Chicken Little, also go to movie, bro. Like I can't hate on that. Ice Age, Dawn of the Dinosaurs. That's another banger, bro. Who doesn't like Sid, bro? Who doesn't like Manny, Diego, bro? The little squirrel, bro. Like we fuck with the dinos as well, dude. Also, Final Fantasy, bro. Bin Laden was very, very obsessed with Final Fantasy, and I don't blame him, bro. Probably saw the chicks in that game, and he was like, "Yeah, this is worth. I'm playing this for a plot now, bro." Look, I know what he is, but I can't be a hater on this specific topics, man. He had taste in this. UFO in Afghanistan. This is another thing people don't know, but yeah, the aliens did invade Earth, and the AQ did shoot down the UFO, and they took parts. And they've essentially held this in secret in Afghanistan, building it up, setting all the tech right, because they want to use this for the Sudan arc. Now, I'll warn you guys, the UFO isn't really that OP. It's literally just a flying disc. So if they start using it, we don't know what will happen. Maybe it'll get shot down, maybe it'll explode the world. But there is a UFO. The aliens were executed by AQ. This happened. There was a massive scale of violence in Afghanistan that people don't talk about, but we will figure something out. We will see what will happen. If the UFOs come, just be ready to shoot them down, because there's some like Arab terrorist flying that thing, and he's gonna crash into you and your entire family. So you have to be ready about that. They could do 9/11 with UFOs this time. Y'all gotta be on the watch out. The anime epidemic. Yeah, guys, look, if you ever see that side of Twitter where Al-Qaeda members are present, you will notice a very common theme that occurs all the time, and it's that all of them, not all, but 60-70% of them are obsessed with anime. And by anime I do mean the girly anime, the anime with the little girls doing girly things, doing weird noises, blushing and shit, all that. And they'll take that and mix it with terrorism and mass killing people, while also doing the religious LARP, which makes me also question like how any of it works, dude. Because it's like, how are you gonna want a woman to be a tent, but you'll also like want like a woman with her fucking titties out, but she looks like a child, so it's okay, I guess. I don't know. The anime AQ thing, we gotta figure it out. That shit needs to be researched in a lab. All intelligence agencies should look into it. Interpol should look into it. The UN should look into it. This is like cooked, bro. The infamous Lady Gaga video. Okay, real ones remember this from the early 2000s. Real ones remember the supposedly leaked Bin Laden video of him dancing to Poker Face by Lady Gaga. He's vibing, he's enjoying it. And look, again, I am not saying anything. I'm just saying that I understand that vibe. I like Lady Gaga, bro. I can't hate on that. Like, look, I get you killed a bunch of people, but yeah, I'd also dance to Lady Gaga. I can't be a judgmental guy about that. Biological weapon, codename Orange Camel. So this is another hidden info. Most people won't talk about this. This is something I personally have researched at my hours and time in. There is, in fact, a secret biological weapon called Orange Camel. It's a biological weapon in form of an animal they've experimented on, specifically a camel. It can literally split itself in two, and it will reveal itself to be an orange inside. It's very bizarre. Probably some demonic energy. I don't know how to pull that off. But that thing can kill, bro. That thing is dangerous. It has a radar sensor within the orange bulbs, and it can stare at you from like a mile away, and it will inform the AQ headquarters about your location. And we don't see these because these are like elite weapons. They're like worst case scenario. We don't know anything about this. This is actually like deeply disturbing. The nature of this creature is very unknown. I'll have a picture up on the screen. You guys will see it. but you can see it. It looks very disturbing. I hope the coalition, every country on earth knows how to deal with this threat. And my prayers is with all of you. Transracialism. Okay, guys. So by this, I don't mean that they're transsexuals or whatever. What I'm saying is within this sphere of terrorism, or you can even call it, there is a sense of whenever you join these groups or someone even affiliates with them, like he's not even a member, he's just a supporter, he thinks suddenly, especially if it's a white person or whatever, right? He thinks now he's racially transformed. So now he thinks he's racially Muslim, therefore he's Arab, right? Like he just morphed into another race. And you can basically say this is like Ariana Grande of terrorism. A lot of people do that. You can see this with like that one fat white guy that went with ISIS. He kind of had that energy. Like he started speaking as if he was like one of them, bro. Like, dude, you're really you're some guy from London. You're not some like guy from Mosul, bro. Like you gotta relax, okay? You gotta relax. And this is very common. You can find this everywhere. You can see Mexicans doing this. You can see like any nationality, Germans, Deutsch, French, like Swedish, Danish, American. This is a very common trend, and they will fight you if you say anything about this. But I find it pretty funny because it's like, why are you transforming your race, bro? You're not like, this would be like me transforming into a black guy. But even that, I think even that would make way more sense than, I don't know, some white guy pretending to be an Arab in Mosul. That's like a bit, yeah. The real AQ anime. Yes, guys, I'm not making this up. There was a real plan in the works to make an Al-Qaeda anime. Well, not in the literal sense that it's a Japanese anime, but in jihadi forums back in the day, there was a cartoonist who made an anime-style manga-looking thing, like a comic thing, and this was supposed to be an actual cartoon to inspire people to join and do terrorism or whatever. But the fact that that existed or was planned is fucking crazy. And if you look at the pictures as well, they all have like red glowing eyes and shit, look fucking terrifying. It's like DBZ if it was more genocidal, but we have no info about this. We don't know if it ever came out. We don't know if it got shut down. We don't know if the artist got blown up. But yeah, that was a real thing. So, yeah, AQ anime was real. Environmental Bin Laden. Okay, this is not a joke. Bin Laden himself did write a letter calling on the American people to help Obama fight against catastrophic climate change and save humanity. He wrote a thing like this. I'm not making this up. It was an undated, unsigned letter that Bin Laden wrote apparently. This was shortly after Obama began his first term, and he talks about climate change being very bad, and he calls on Americans to launch a revolution to liberate the US president from the influences that make him stay in wars, whatever, and to, save humanity from harmful gases that threaten its destiny. So Bin Laden, sometime before his death, starts rambling about environmentalism and climate change, and he said that the world fighting climate change would be better than fighting against Islam, and they would talk about it attempting to reduce the release of gases or whatever. Dude, this is kind of like a nuke or whatever, because it's like at some point when terrorists don't want to do it anymore, they started just moving towards environmentalism. It's honestly pretty bizarre, but it also kind of shows me that whenever these groups start affiliating with AQ and terrorism, when they switch up, I think like even Bin Laden was kind of doing that with this, because he became like a green politician out of nowhere, bro, like last second. And this shit is just bizarre, bro. Everyone should look into this. But yeah, dude, whenever you look at your local green politician talking about environmentalism, just know Bin Laden agrees with him. Let that sink in. Alright, guys, this concludes this iceberg. It was a pain in the ass to make, but I hope you guys learned something along the way. Maybe we're entertained a bit, and it was a journey to say the least. And remember, like, subscribe, comment, boost this everywhere. Send this to your grandma, send this to your friends. If you don't, the environment is gonna fucking gas the shit out of you, and you're gonna die horribly.
Yo, what's up, guys? Okay, look, we are fucked on Earth now. They've released the acetylene gas, and we are fucking dying. Okay, easier. Cancel fucking recolonizing Earth. We are fucked, bro. We didn't subscribe and like and share and commented on Nader's video, bro. We are the fucking top die, bro. We are fucking bro. I'm dipping the fuck, bro.
Verdict stolen. Wala. Mohammed, your first night. Dakri. Keeping that gun on me, I can't get a touch on.